I stared at the phone screen, my palms ice cold, even though our apartment in Houston had the heat on. A message from my mother had just popped up, short, cold, and sharp enough to take the air out of my chest. Madison, your dad and I talked. We're not coming. A wedding that small, honestly, it's not worth flying the whole family to Arizona for. I couldn't believe I'd already read that line 6 times. My heart ached like it was being squeezed from the inside. Before I could catch my breath, more messages came flooding in. From my sister Lindsay, my younger brother Josh, and both of my cousins. Not a single one of them would attend the wedding. They all gave excuses, but the message was the same. My wedding was too small to be worth their time. I let the phone fall to my lap and stepped out onto the balcony, where the golden rays of late afternoon lit up the tall buildings. The breeze tangled my hair, but my mind was even more chaotic. Everything we'd planned so carefully for nearly a year unraveled in a few cruel lines of text. The sliding glass door opened behind me. I didn't turn around. I already knew it was Zach, my fiancé. He stepped beside me and gently placed his hand on my shoulder. "What's going on, babe?" I didn't answer right away. My throat was dry, my eyes stung. It took me a while to whisper. "No one in my family is coming. Not one." Zach didn't say anything. He didn't ask why. He just took the phone from my hand and scrolled through the unread messages. I heard him exhale. Not from anger, but a kind of helplessness. Then his voice came, low and steady. "That's brutal. They know how important this day is to you." I turned my face away. "They think just because we're not booking a big hotel ballroom, not inviting 200 people, it's not a real wedding." Zach nodded, then wrapped his arms around me from behind. "You know what? This whole wedding, from start to finish, is about you and me. Not them, not proving anything, and definitely not living up to some outdated expectation." I closed my eyes and let the tears fall. Zach's words didn't erase the hurt, but they kept me from falling apart. I'd imagined my mom adjusting my veil, my sister helping me into my shoes, my dad walking me down the aisle. But now, all that remained was their painful absence. The more I thought about it, the more I realized their coldness wasn't indifference. It was dismissal. They hadn't just declined to show up. They invalidated the love, effort, and dreams I'd poured into the last 10 months. Zach squeezed my hand. "They don't want to come? Let them stay home. We're going to have an incredible day. With the people who actually care." I looked at him. In his eyes, there wasn't a single doubt. And in that moment, I knew I would still walk down that aisle. No parents, no siblings, just me. Just him. And I would not apologize for choosing something simple, but real. "We'll keep going as planned," I said, my voice no longer trembling. "But I won't forget this." Zach didn't answer. He just held my hand tighter. I looked out at the sunset fading over the balcony railing. In that moment, I was no longer the daughter begging for her family's approval. When I walked into the bedroom, the wedding dress box sat silently in the corner of the closet. I had chosen it with complete faith in one sacred day, a custom design from Los Angeles, hand-embroidered with hundreds of crystals, Italian lace bodice, and a skirt that flared out more than 10 feet. Just the dress alone had cost almost as much as a brand new SUV, and that was only the beginning. I opened the drawer and pulled out my dark brown leather notebook, the one where I'd written down every detail: floral types, food options, guest list arrangements. Ironically, my family's names had been right at the top, with special seats assigned. Now, every name had been crossed out with cold red ink. Zach walked in carrying 2 mugs of hot tea. He set one down and pulled up a chair across from me. "I just spoke to the dance floor company," he said calmly. "The quartz tiles arrived. They'll start framing on Monday." I nodded. "What about the lighting along the cliff?" "All done. Their team inspected the layout yesterday. There's going to be a row of motion sensor lights along the walkway from reception to the altar. It'll change colors to match the music." I bit my lip, wondering if my sister would still call this wedding too small if she saw it now. Zach noticed the hesitation in my eyes. He leaned forward and rested his hand on mine. Do you regret keeping it all private? I shook my head. No, I wish they would have come. Because they love me, not because the wedding looks expensive. He paused, then said, I think it's time you knew something. I looked up. The reason why this wedding could afford to be so over the top. I frowned. What are you talking about? Zach set his tea down, opened the nightstand drawer, and pulled out a thick envelope. He handed me a stack of documents. Remember that app I was building back in Austin? I remembered. It was a secure messaging platform for healthcare workers. Back then, he worked from home. Skinny, always in hoodies, often with coffee stains on his sleeves from passing out mid-scode. 3 months after we moved to Houston, a company in California bought the entire platform for over $6 million. I stared at him, stunned. I didn't tell anyone but my lawyer, he continued. Not even my mom. I didn't want the wedding to turn into a brag fest or an excuse for people to start asking for loans. I sat there quietly. My mind swirled between awe, admiration, and a bitter ache. My family had mocked me for overcomplicating everything, and yet here I was, preparing for a wedding built on the sweat, intelligence, and vision of the man I was about to marry. Zach looked at me gently. Are you mad at me? I squeezed his hand gently. No, I just feel proud. And sad, too. Ugh. Because maybe, if my mom had known how luxurious this wedding would be, she would have shown up. Not for me, but for the photos she could post online. Zach let out a sigh. That's exactly why I didn't tell anyone sooner. We sat in silence. Outside the window, the city lights were starting to glow. I pictured how the ceremony would unfold. Just 30 close friends, a long table by the rocky edge draped in hand-stitched silk, smoked salmon prepared by a Michelin-starred chef flown in from San Diego. None of it was meant to impress strangers, but to mark a love built on choice, not obligation, not appearances. Zach stood up, wrapped his arms around me, and kissed my forehead. We don't need them to make that day sacred, he whispered. We have each other, and the people who truly care. I looked down at the stack of documents in my hand, then out at the blinking lights on the horizon. They didn't know what they were choosing to miss, but sooner or later, they would. That afternoon, I sat alone by the living room window, holding a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Outside, the rain had just stopped. Puddles on the street reflected the soft yellow glow from the street lamps. The wedding was in exactly 10 days. I thought I'd be crying from joy by now. Instead, the tears came from an absence I couldn't fill. The guest list was still pinned to the board beneath our engagement photo. A whole section of names, my family's, was crossed out in red ink. But no line could erase the ache inside me. A text notification dinged. I picked up the phone, heart skipping when I saw the name, Abby, my younger sister. I'm just being honest. You act like the world revolves around your wedding. If you actually wanted family there, you would have picked somewhere closer and easier to get to. Right below it was a message from my mom, a second punch to the gut. Madison, it hurts that you didn't consider everyone's feelings. Not everyone has the means like you. You planned something far away and small. It feels like you deliberately left us out. I set the phone down, shaking, not from cold. My throat tightened as if an invisible hand were pressing against it. I leaned my head back against the sofa, closed my eyes, and tried to swallow the tears. But they came anyway. They called me selfish, all because I wanted a quiet celebration with people who truly wished me well. They said I was distant, yet none of them had asked what I wanted, how I felt. I wasn't angry they declined. I was angry they didn't see the value of being there. They acted like I invited them to a casual backyard party, not the day I started a new chapter of my life. Zach came home at 7 p.m., The moment he walked in, he saw me sitting in the dim light, silent. He didn't need to ask what happened. I handed him my phone. He read the messages, then set it down, his usual calm now gone from his face. "This isn't your fault," he said. "And you don't owe anyone a performance just to prove something." I gave a hollow laugh. They want a wedding, close enough, big enough, flashy enough. They want me to rearrange my life around their comfort. But no one asked if I was okay not having my own family there. He gripped my hand. "You have every right to plan your wedding your way. They chose not to come, and now they're trying to flip it back on you?" I drew in a slow breath, but the heaviness didn't lift. I didn't need an extravagant wedding to show off. If my family had wanted crowds and spectacle, I could have invited 300 people and rented out an entire resort. But I didn't. I only wanted 30 guests, 30 who truly wanted to be there for me. 3 days later, while I was doing my final dress fitting before we relocated to Sedona, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail. "Madison, I hope you don't think I don't care, but you have to understand, your wedding made things uncomfortable. No one knew what to wear, how long to stay, or where to go. You kept it all quiet and far away without asking for input. It made people feel excluded." I let out a bitter laugh. I'd sent out the invites 3 months earlier, with maps, schedules, hotel suggestions, even a QR code for shuttle service. I'd done everything right, but it turned out it wasn't about difficulty. They simply didn't care enough to show up. That evening, I told Zach everything. He said only one thing. "You invited them with your whole heart. They chose not to come. Then they called you selfish? That's not on you." I didn't respond. I quietly pulled out the last printed wedding invitation, slipped it between the pages of our unfinished photo album, and wrote a single line underneath. "Maybe one day, they won't regret missing it." The wedding day arrived under the blazing sun of Sedona, where the sky stretched out in cloudless blue, and the red rock cliffs looked like they'd been hand-painted by summer itself. I stood in the attic suite of the resort, looking through the glass window. The ceremony platform shimmered by the edge of the cliff, overlooking the deep green of Verde Valley. Imported granite tiles from Portugal glowed in the sunlight. White flowers climbed a delicate steel arch shaped like a crown. The silence was breathtaking. Rachel, my best friend since college, walked up behind me and gently fluffed out the train of my gown. "You know," she whispered, her eyes on the lacework, "I never thought a bride could leave me speechless. But this? Madison, you look like something out of a dream." I smiled. Zach stood waiting at the end of the aisle, the sunset casting a golden glow over his brown hair, turning him into the one person in this world I wanted to trust forever. As I walked toward him, his eyes shimmered. He took my hand, like letting go would mean losing everything. I heard the officiant's voice, but all I focused on was his hand, his breath, and the way he looked at me like I was the most sacred thing he'd ever seen. We exchanged vows under the gentle twilight, as a breeze rustled through the flowers and the sun dipped behind Camelback Mountain, making way for a new chapter. The reception took place in a grand glass hall overlooking the valley. The ceiling sparkled with hand-blown crystal chandeliers from Venice, casting a glow like a sky full of stars. On the long table draped in ivory hand-embroidered silk, 30 seats were arranged perfectly, each with a handwritten note recalling a personal memory with us. The 7-course menu was curated by a French chef flown in from New York, featuring dishes from smoked salmon tartare to duck with truffle orange glaze. Each course was paired with rare wines from Zach's private collection. I held a glass of champagne so expensive it made me uneasy to even remember the price, and raised it with friends as soft violin music floated from a quartet at the far end of the room. Rachel leaned in and whispered, "Do you regret anything?" I looked out the glass window. White candles flickered in the breeze, and the genuine smiles of close friends softened my heart. I don't regret having this wedding, I said. But I do regret that the people who should have been here chose not to be. Around 10 p.m., we moved outdoors. The dance floor, laid with hand-cut stone, lit up with shifting LED lights reflecting off the quartz surface. The first song played, the one Zach and I listened to back when we were broke college students. We began our first dance like every past heartache was melting with each step. At exactly 2 a.m., Zach took my hand and led me to the open field behind the reception hall. You ready? Before I could respond, a soft boom echoed through the sky, followed by a burst of golden-white fireworks lighting up Sedona. Music played. The orchestral piece Zach once said sounded like what my heart felt when I saw you for the first time. I stood still. Behind me were friends cheering. In front of me, the man I loved, looking at me like I was magic. No one who skipped this can ever take this moment from you, Zach whispered. I stayed silent, but deep in my chest, a quiet ache remained. A mother's hand that once held mine, a sister's hug. Now just memories in my mind. I looked up at the sky, where fireworks still bloomed. Even though no one from my family came, I knew, if they saw what was unfolding, they'd understand. Or they would soon enough. 3 weeks after the wedding, on a quiet Saturday night, Zach and I were curled up on the blue velvet sofa, soft yellow light bouncing off the leather album our photographer had just delivered. When I flipped to the first page, I froze for a second. The opening photo captured the kiss right after our vows. Sedona's orange-red sky in the background, golden light catching the veil like I was glowing. The framing, the lighting, the emotion. It looked like something from a luxury wedding magazine. I glanced at Zach, who smiled. She said she'd send us the draft, he said. I think it's time we go with Plan B. I laughed. You mean posting the photos? He nodded, eyes still on the next shot. The candlelit dinner, friends toasting joyfully, me sitting beside Zach with white orchid petals scattered across the table. Just 3 pictures, he said slowly. No captions, no explanations. Let them see what they missed. I stayed quiet, flipping through images that felt like touching every healed scar. I didn't hate my family, but I had invited them with a full heart, and was met with cold refusals and painful judgment. 3 photos, I agreed. One of the ceremony, one from the dinner, one from the dance floor. No long captions, let the images speak. Zach smiled. I'll help you choose. The next morning, I posted 3 photos on my Instagram. No selfies, no shade, just a simple caption. A month ago, I married the kindest man I've ever known. It was a small, peaceful, perfect day. #intimate wedding. #no filter needed. I set the phone down, made coffee, and thought I'd ignore social media for a while. But not even 45 minutes later, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages from friends. Oh my God, Madison, looks like heaven. Where did you get married? It looks like a movie. And then came the family texts. First was Abby. WTF? You had a wedding like that and didn't tell anyone? Looks insanely fancy. Then Julia. Unbelievable. If you'd told us it'd be like that, I never would have said no. Why hide it? Finally, my mother. 3 missed calls, I didn't answer. She left a voicemail, her voice panicked. Madison, call me. Right now. I don't understand why you would do this. Zach was making tea. I handed him my phone without saying a word. He listened, frowning. They're not apologizing. They're just shocked by how glamorous the wedding was, not by how deeply they hurt you. A bitter smile tugged at my lips. They only regret not having pretty photos to show off. The messages kept coming that afternoon. Even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 2 years commented, "This is what you call a small wedding? Could have fooled me." I didn't respond. I didn't need to explain. I just sat quietly in the sunlight streaming through the window, feeling something lift from my chest. Not triumph, just peace. That evening, my mother sent another message. Madison, if you really cared about family, you wouldn't have hidden such a grand wedding from us. You've embarrassed us all. I stared at the screen, no longer angry, maybe because I finally understood words. Don't weigh as much as actions anymore. And they, whether they admitted it or not, had chosen to stay out of the most beautiful day of my life. Not because they couldn't attend, but because they didn't believe it was worth attending. I typed one line and hit send. I invited everyone. Everyone declined. As for embarrassment, that's not mine to carry. Zach pulled me closer, squeezing my hand gently. They're going to keep talking. Do you regret it? I shook my head. No. I don't regret letting them see. I only wish... It didn't take 3 photos for them to remember I'm their daughter. 2 days after I posted the wedding photos, my mother called for the 5th time. I watched the screen buzz, then decided to answer, holding the phone away and turning on speaker. Zach was beside me, laptop on his lap, but his eyes shifted immediately from the screen. Madison? Her voice was sharp. Can you explain to me why you staged a wedding like that and then acted like nothing happened? I took a deep breath. What exactly do you want me to explain? I asked calmly. You made everyone look heartless. The whole family is talking. They think I deliberately skipped your big glamorous wedding. If you had just been clear from the start... I cut her off. I was clear. You received an invitation. Very detailed, very clear. Everyone did. You're the one who said it's not worth traveling that far for a small ceremony. No one was tricked. You all just didn't believe I could pull off anything more than a Sunday brunch. Silence hung for a few seconds. I just thought you were trying to keep it quiet, simple. I didn't know. Didn't know? Or didn't care, I said, bitterness finally slipping through. You can travel across 4 countries with your friends, but Sedona was too far for your daughter's wedding. Her voice softened. Madison, you're being unfair. No, I'm being honest. You didn't come because you thought missing it wouldn't matter. But now, seeing everything, you're feeling regret, and instead of apologizing, you're blaming me. I ended the call before she could reply. Zach placed a hand on my back, silent. I didn't cry, just felt hollow. Hollow from something that never should have happened. Later that afternoon, there was a soft knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was. Emily. My youngest sister, the only one who hadn't commented since the wedding photos went live. She was 23, in a gray hoodie and jeans, holding a box of pastries and 2 canned teas. Her eyes were red. I didn't call first because I was scared you'd say no, Emily mumbled. But I needed to see you. I stepped aside. The room felt strangely quiet. Emily placed the pastries on the table, then pulled a crumpled envelope from her backpack. Our old wedding invite. I kept this, she said, voice trembling. And I thought, it's probably just going to be something simple, you know? I never imagined I'd feel this much regret. I looked at her without speaking. I saw the photos, the video, even that reel Zach posted. It was all so beautiful. Not because it was expensive, but because it was heartfelt. It felt like you two really crafted a day that meant something. I sat across from her, watching Emily cry, not out of defiance this time, but remorse. You know what? She continued, wiping her cheek. Mom told me you kept it a secret just to avoid inviting people, but now I see she was wrong. She was wrong from the beginning. I clenched my hand slightly. I invited everyone. I was hoping someone in the family would see the value. Emily bowed her head. And no one did. I know. I'm sorry. Her voice cracked, more sincere than any text I'd received all week. Then, Emily said something I never expected. I want to help organize a family gathering. Just here, something small, so they can see, and maybe, if they have the guts, say sorry. I was speechless. It's not another party, she added. It's a chance, a way for them to stop pretending nothing happened. A way for you to stop carrying this weight alone. I turned to look at Zach, who had just stepped out of the kitchen with 2 glasses of water. He looked at me, waiting for my decision. I let out a slow breath. Not because I had fully forgiven anyone, but because for once, in that quiet room, a real apology had been spoken. We picked a Saturday afternoon for the gathering. We didn't call it a party. We didn't label it a makeup event. It was simply a time to sit down, watch photos and videos, and, if anyone was brave enough, say the things that should have been said a long time ago. Zach and I tidied up the living room, keeping things simple. A small tray of pastries, a few glasses of fruit punch, and a large screen already connected to the hard drive with our wedding video. Emily arrived early, bringing a jar of wildflowers and a homemade apple pie. My throat tightened a little when I saw her shyly place the pie on the table and turn to me, asking, "You okay?" I managed a faint smile. "And you?" She smiled faintly. "Let's just see if they show up." But they came, one by one. My father was the first. He walked in with a thin envelope in hand, hugged me for a long time, and whispered, "I should have been there." I didn't answer. I just squeezed his hand gently and led him inside. Next came my 2 older brothers, along with their wives and kids. They sat a bit stiffly, making awkward small talk with Zach. No one brought up the texts. I didn't either. Finally, my mother arrived with Julia and Grace. The 3 of them stood outside the door for a few seconds as if debating whether to knock. Emily saw them and stepped out to open it herself. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Come in." I didn't greet them. I simply gestured politely toward the living room. My mother looked around the apartment, her eyes sweeping past the wedding photo on the wall, the new couch, and then stopping at the simple spread Zach and I had set out. She inhaled, as if bracing herself. "Your place, it's really cozy," she said. "Thanks," I replied, then turned to Zach. "Let's play the video?" He nodded and pressed play. The room fell silent as the wedding footage began to roll. One image after another flashed on the screen. Me, walking between rows of white flowers. Zach waiting at the altar, sunlight glowing through my veil. The breeze, the music, the vows. Every detail so vivid it caught even me off guard, like seeing it unfold all over again. When the fireworks lit up the sky at the end of the celebration, I turned my head. My mother was wiping her eyes. Julia stared at the floor. Grace bit her lip, her eyes glassy. I turned off the screen. No one spoke. The faint hum of the air conditioner was the only sound, a quiet reminder that silence had lasted far too long. Then my mother stood up. "Madison?" she began, her eyes locking on mine. Steady, unguarded. "At first, I thought you were trying to hide it." "Trying? To shut the family out of your big day?" But watching that video, I realized I was the one who stepped out. I didn't reply, didn't nod, didn't shake my head. "You invited me, formally. You even sent a detailed itinerary. But I convinced myself, if it wasn't a big event, it wasn't worth the effort." She paused, exhaled. I was wrong. I gripped my water glass tightly. "I'm sorry I wasn't there. Not because the party wasn't grand enough, but because I didn't believe in you. I didn't cherish that day the way a mother should have." This time, I didn't look away. I met her eyes. And in that rare moment, she wasn't trying to control the atmosphere. She accepted her fault not because she feared being judged, but because she truly understood she had hurt her daughter. Julia stepped forward and pulled a small envelope from her purse. "I know I said some awful things," she said. "I downplayed your choices, and then I tried to flip the blame back on you. I don't have the perfect words, but maybe this letter can show you I've thought it through." Later, I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and 2 old childhood photos of us in cheap plastic princess dresses, playing pretend weddings in our front yard. Grace didn't say much. She just hugged me tightly and whispered, "Next time, I want to be there." When the gathering ended, the tension had lifted. They no longer looked at me as the one who tarnished the family's reputation. They looked at me as a grown woman, someone who lived truthfully, loved wholeheartedly, and held a wedding that honored herself. Zach gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze as my mother was leaving. "How do you feel?" he asked. I didn't smile, but I told the truth. Finally, I felt like someone in the family showed up for me. Not for the pictures, not for appearances, but because they knew it was time to stop pretending. 6 months have passed since that evening. We didn't become a perfect family overnight, but the biggest shift was this. No one acted like nothing had happened anymore. My mother started texting me every week. It wasn't always smooth, sometimes too short, sometimes off topic. But I knew it was her way of trying to make amends. Julia occasionally sent photos of dishes she was learning to cook, and Grace asked if I wanted to take a weekend yoga class together. Something I couldn't have imagined a year ago. Emily became the quiet bridge. She never took sides or pressured me to forgive. But her presence, steadfast and sincere, was like a slow, steady stitch mending the torn fabric of our family. By June, Zach suggested, "How about a small dinner to celebrate our first anniversary? Nothing big, just simple." I ran my fingers along the rim of my glass, then looked up. Okay. Not to test them, but to give them a real chance to move forward with me. We prepared the dinner in the backyard of our new home, a small house in the Scottsdale suburbs that Zach and I had bought after he officially left his old job to grow his new venture. Strung lights from the trees to the porch, set up a long table draped in white linen, and placed a sprig of dried lavender on each napkin. Nothing fancy. We ordered from our favorite Italian restaurant and made salad and dessert ourselves. And right at 6 p.m., everyone showed up. Every single one of them. My mother brought a lemon mousse cake she had baked herself. I watched her place it on the table, her hands slightly trembling, then hesitantly asked, "Can I help you pour the lemonade?" I nodded, and that, to me, was the second apology. Quiet, unspoken. Dinner unfolded in a soft hum of laughter. The kids ran across the yard with glow bracelets lighting up their wrists. Zach shared stories from our second honeymoon in Greece, a quiet, private trip we took 3 months after the wedding. After the meal, I stood, holding my glass, and gently tapped it to gather attention. "Tonight, we're not just celebrating 1 year of marriage," I said, scanning each face, so familiar, yet once so distant. "We're celebrating something that should have been there all along. Presence." Everyone went quiet for a moment. Then my mother stood, her hand resting on the back of her chair. "Madison," she began, "if there's one thing I've learned through all this, it's that I shouldn't judge anything by how grand it looks or by what others might think." She paused, turning to face me. Going the distance, taking the time, setting things aside, that's how you show someone they matter. I forgot that, but I remember now. I smiled. Julia added softly, "Now I understand. Your wedding was never small. It only felt that way to those who refused to look deeper." Zach stepped beside me and placed his hand gently, firmly, on my shoulder. I looked around. No fireworks, no live music, no wedding dress or marble floors. But there were warm eyes, honest voices. People who once turned their backs, now slowly turning toward me again. I thought back to that day under the blazing red sky of Sedona. Just 30 guests, a quiet afternoon. Many called it small. But now I understand. A wedding feels small not because of the guest count, but because of the absence of those who were supposed to be there. And today, even if late, they showed up. We cut the cake. I heard my mother say to Zach, "Thank you for not giving up on this family." Zach replied, "I just did what was best for Madison." I turned away to hide my smile. Not every crack gets mended all at once. But with what we've rebuilt, I don't need a second wedding. Just a backyard dinner under soft golden lights where people set aside pride and choose to love for real. And that is enough. Madison's story is a powerful reminder that genuine presence matters more than any lavish display. A wedding isn't small because of how many guests attend. It feels that way when the ones who truly matter aren't there. In real life, hurt often doesn't come from harsh words, but from silence and absence. But when there's still room to show up, to apologize, to move forward, family can heal, not through grand gestures, but through honesty. What do you think of Madison's choice and this emotional journey toward healing? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, meaningful stories about life and family.